Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August meeting of the Western BCP Planning Committee. First, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out our housekeeping notice.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. And finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. And first of all, have we any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor John Challoner, Councillor Simon McCormack, Councillor Peter Sidaway and Councillor Joe Clements, and substitute members Councillor Tony Trent is here for Councillor Sidaway today.
Thank you. And I'll clarify that we have the same attendance, except for the absence of Councillor Clements, as we had at the previous meeting, which part of today's agenda is the deferred item from that meeting and requires that the same people take part in the decision making. So let's just introduce ourselves so that you recognise us and recognise our voices. I'm Councillor Marion Le Pedvin. I'm Chair of Western Planning Committee and I'm the Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward.
Peter Cooper, Hamworthy Ward, Labour.
Party affiliation is not relevant to this committee.
Apologies.
Councillor Michelle Dower, Kinston Ward, member of the committee.
Thank you.
Cameron Adams, Councillor for Kinston.
Councillor Chapman Law for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Tony Trent for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Kate Salmon, Moordown.
Brian Hitchcock, Hamworthy.
Thank you. And we also have various council officers with us. On my right,
David Hodges, Development Management Manager. Chair.
And you've already heard from Ms. Holyoke, who's the Democratic Services Officer and will be taking the minutes and keeping us generally in order very efficiently. We also have various officers online. We have the they can introduce themselves since they're on screen, if they would. Can we start with Piotr? Can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Piotr Kulik. I'm the Senior Planning Officer for BCP.
Thank you. And
Mr. Hill, Andrew Hill.
Oh, sorry, I'm Andy Hill. I'm one of the Senior Environmental Health Officers.
Thank you. And we also have in attendance, but not visible at this moment, the legal officer, Jaspreet Lyle, and he will be involved in the discussion when if it becomes relevant. So could I ask members of the committee, first of all, if you've got any declaration of interest to declare? If you think of anything as we proceed, please mention it whenever we get to that point in the agenda. So we move on now to the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting, which was on the 18th of July. Is everybody happy to confirm, or are there any queries? Happy? Thank you. Consider those confirmed. So as our agenda proceeds, we will start with an officer presentation on each item. Then we'll hear any public speakers who've registered, then ward councillors. Then we move on to the committee to ask questions, factual questions, and then to debate and come to a decision. So we've only got 2 applications to look at today. The first one is the deferred West Hants Lawn Tennis Club. Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Chair. Looks like that's coming up. Hang on, let's just get it to start. Okay. Yes, members, as you recall, this application was deferred from the previous meeting for site visit to take place. Not going to rehearse the full details or presentation that you've seen before, but just to mop up some of the issues that were raised during the site visit for clarification on matters that potentially couldn't be answered whilst we were out on site. The first is just in relation to the acoustic screen details for the court. I may have slightly undersold those out on site. During the site visit, we saw the brick wall with the fence that was going along on the top here, but also the acoustic fencing wraps around the side here, so 4 metre high down on the east side, and then on the west side 3 metres high for 10 metres long here, and then 3 metres high for a further 7.5 metres along here. That's in addition to the in effect the plain court glass and fence which surrounds each court. And just a little bit of clarity on how the nature of the game is played. So when someone is serving on this side of the court, they have to hit the ball over the net. It has to bounce on this side before it can be hit back. If the ball is bounced over on this side, then if the player hits it straight against the back glass without bouncing, that's a foul shot, they lose a point. So that's a less likely occurrence, but they can, after the ball has bounced, hit the ball against the glass with the aim of dropping it over the fence, but bouncing before it hits the glass on the other side. So if they slam it against the glass and it goes straight over to the glass on the other side, again, they lose the point. So the art of the game is in effect to, if you're hitting it against the back glass, is sufficient power for it to drop over the net, but bounce then in that area before being able to play back. Just to clarify some of the distances that you would have seen on site to the various properties. So the paddle courts are just in here. So from the, we've checked these measurements from our own Ordnance Survey data system. So 51 metres to the north of the closest property, which is 15 Roslin Road South. And then this is 20 Roslin Road South and number 22. And then to the south, this property is number 17 Dunkeld Road, and this is number 21 Dunkeld Road, which is the one you could see closer above the hedge. The question was also asked, I think, by Councillor Trent about the distance to from the existing court that we saw at West Hants to the property immediately opposite, which is number 50 Elgin Road. So we get that distance to be around 27 metres. That's just to show you that relationship of the actual court to that neighbour opposite. And then finally, we visited the East Dorset site. So this is just to give you a little bit of context to how those courts relate to the properties surrounding that site. So there's considerably more properties bordering onto the site. But in case you can't read that, from Saltlands Road, it's over 100 metres to the backs of the properties, similar distance up into that far corner. It's over 100 metres to the block of flats you can see, the Steep Dean, which are the ones that adjoin Parkside Station, but slightly closer to these properties down in Worthington Crescent, around 50 metres, the distance is there. So, Chair, that just mops up the any additional issues from the site visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. The issue for residents is that they will experience noise and disturbance. The applicants argue that the noise at the nearest sensitive locations is to an acceptable level, and you've just shown that they're measuring the distances to the houses and not to the garden boundaries. The whole basis of this reasonable objection is that the noise parameters you are being asked to accept do not properly consider the gardens of the surrounding properties. Planning permission can only safely be granted if the noise levels are within acceptable ranges, but the point where the noise is measured is clearly critical to assessing what is acceptable. The point of measurement should be the garden boundary fences, and the measurement at that fence should be no more than the maximum accepted level, which is 45 dB. Now, the modelling that that's been submitted shows an average figure over an hour. It also shows maximum noise levels which significantly exceed the average. Now, members, you have witnessed this activity and the noise it creates, and it is not an activity or a noise which can be averaged out over an hour. It's a consistent percussive nature which generates maximum noise figures, and you need to consider the maximum noise levels, not an average. You are being asked to accept a proposal which will introduce noise. National and local policies are clear. Proposals which introduce a source of noise into a noise-sensitive environment should be refused. An unacceptable source of noise is one that exceeds 45 dB, and the applicant's own modelling shows that those levels are exceeded. Objective analysis shows that the noise levels will exceed acceptable levels within the residential gardens. Also, in the late afternoon, background noise in this area falls, and the maximum allowed should be much lower during that period, and the proposed courts cannot operate within those parameters. Members, you're asked to refuse this application. It will be up to the applicants to resubmit if they can achieve a scheme that does take into account adjoining gardens and does not exceed acceptable levels at garden boundaries. And taking the average figure for this activity, members, is not the correct way to do it. The residents will suffer noise and disturbance within their gardens. Thank you.
I should have pointed out before anyone came to speak that I've used my discretion to allow a speaking time of 2.5 minutes, which is half the normal allowance, because opportunity was afforded at the original planning committee to speak for the full 5 minutes, and we are only looking at a very limited part of the application today. So we're only looking particularly at one aspect, and therefore that 2.5 minutes should be more than adequate to cover that particular aspect, given that they've already spoken or had the opportunity, and I think all used it, to speak for 5 minutes at the previous meeting. So we take everything into account. So now we're on to to Matt Allen to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you for taking the time to visit the proposed location of the 2 new paddle courts at West Hants, and also go and see the newly installed paddle courts at East Dorset, which members approved earlier this year. The location of the 2 new courts has specifically been chosen following in-depth discussions with the Council's Environmental Health Officer, who I see is online today to answer any specific professional questions in respect of the noise complaints. This is most central location within the club, furthest away from neighbours. As you've seen from your site visits, the courts are bounded to the north by a 2-metre brick wall, which will have a further 2-metre acoustic glazing on top of it, and you've got the intervening car park. It's bounded to the east by the existing clubhouse. It's bounded to the south by the intervening tennis courts, clay tennis courts, and a very large conifer hedge beyond. Similarly, the new courts would not be visible from Elgin Road to the west, where the nearest houses are over 150 metres away, with the intervening hedging, grandstand, and numerous tennis courts. Members would have seen that due to the format of a standard paddle tennis court enclosure, that the sides are more open than the ends. I was pleased that members witnessed firsthand the effectiveness that the glass acoustic barrier at East Dorset had on minimising the noise from the game, because the scheme before you, as David Hodges just clarified, proposes an almost identical acoustic glass screen down both the eastern and western sides of the new paddle courts. It's because of this comprehensive mitigation that the Council's Professional Environmental Health Officer firmly concludes that neighbouring residents would not be adversely affected by the noise impacts of the new paddle courts. In addition, West Hants have confirmed that they were installing the same specification courts to those installed at East Dorset, which you would have noticed of slightly thicker glass and also softer flooring than the older existing courts at West Hants. Both of these further benefits will help in reducing noise reduction, which can be secured by condition. Whilst the existing paddle court is not the subject of this application, as it already has planning permission to open to 10 o'clock in the evening, members have the opportunity to impose a condition here today, which West Hants are agreeable to, requiring a similar 3-metre high acoustic fence, either glazed or timber, down the western side of the existing paddle court to further reduce noise impact to those neighbours on Elgin Road. During the last committee, it was suggested there should be a 6 p.m. closing time. This would simply not be viable, as many juniors and majority of working adults can't get to the club until after 6 o'clock. West Hants would be prepared to play to finish on all 3 paddle courts at 9 p.m. Monday to Friday and 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. This is less than members approved at East Dorset paddle courts, which is 8 to 9, 7 days a week. Councillors, in conclusion, I hope you share your view of your professional officers and move to approve in favour of this recommendation. Thank you for your time visiting site.
Thank you. And now to Speaker's Ward Councillor, we have Councillor Karen Rampton.
Members, thank you for your time today. Your site visits on Monday will hopefully have dispelled the notion that paddle has the same noise levels as tennis, despite the officer's statement at paragraph 51. Perhaps he didn't go, as you did, down the side of the courts where it was appreciably louder, and that was during a fairly subdued game. I've witnessed far louder, and of course residents who live nearby can attest to that. The visit to East Dorset was interesting in that it's a very different location than West Hants. The court's back onto a school rather than houses, and the acoustic mitigation panels are far thicker than those proposed here. The several properties at West Hants will be affected most are within 61 metres of the site to their garden, which is where the measurements must be taken, as residents have the right to the amenity of their property, including their garden. All those have submitted objections. The unfortunate people living by the existing court have to keep their windows and doors closed in all weathers. A member asked that a demonstration be given of the balls being thwacked against the glass panels, which unfortunately was refused, as you would then have witnessed just how loud this is. Please understand, it is not just during a game that this is heard, but this is a method used in training, and the repetitive thumping against glass is very loud and disturbing. The proposal is to put screens on the north and west end of the courts. This leaves residents in Dunkeld Road to the south, as well as some of Roslin Road South residents exposed. Why are panels not being insisted on as mitigation all the way round to protect their amenity? There is insufficient evidence to prove that residents won't be affected, and in my opinion, paragraph 53 of your report, saying there are powers to act if a noise nuisance, is very odd. Why would you wait and not insist on mitigation from the start, should you be minded to approve? If it's needed on 2 sides, it's needed on 4. This application will cause a level of noise and disturbance to residents which is unacceptable, and it's contrary to CS 38 and CS 41 of the local plan. I would respectfully ask that you refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges, have you got any further comments on this?
Yes, I think it'd just be helpful for members' benefit just to clarify a couple of points in relation to the noise information, how that's dealt with and assessed. So the fundamental principle is if we're given a technical report as a local planning authority, we're entitled to rely on that, where that's done by a suitably qualified person in determining that application. And we're also confirming the point that our own environmental health officers are qualified and experienced to assess those noise reports. In relation to the acoustic report that you've had provided by the applicant, that's based on survey data taken from people playing on that existing court that we saw in the corner nearest Elgin Road. The methodology that they then use to assess the noise impacts is the same as the one used for the East Dorset site. The noise measurements from the West Hand site generally correspond, so it's basically the same. They get the same data, but it's slightly noisier. So basically, the assessment's been made on a slightly noisier use of the court. So Sport England's guidance on all-weather pitches states that to avoid moderate annoyance, the upper noise limit of 50 dB per hour should not be exceeded external to residential properties within external living areas. And then the Sport England guidance further states that it's not necessarily the case that where these levels are exceeded, the noise will adversely affect nearby properties. So in the data report that's come from the applicant, you've hopefully you can see where that sort of 45 to 50 contour is, which is that orange area there, and that's within entirely contained within the West Hand site. So you have got noise readings at the boundaries here, and you have got noise readings with these sort of black and white dots at the properties themselves. That's without any of the mitigation from the fencing. When you add in the mitigation from the fencing, go to the next slide, that orange contour, the 45 to 50, reduces further down into the site. And again, you can see that the noise levels that you're getting are well under that kind of 50 level. It's not unusual to have competing professional opinions in different reports. You've heard from Mr. Park, you've heard from Mr. Annan today. Their fellow chartered town planners like myself presented both sides. Does leave the committee in a slightly invidious position because you've got evidently competing technical data. Where in effect you've got a report from the applicant presenting their side and a report from the objectors presenting their side as well. It'd be wrong to automatically attach lesser weight to a technical report simply because it supports the applicant's position any more than it would be to attach lesser weight to one commissioned by the objectors, which supports their position. The information submitted needs to be considered on its merits, fairly on its content. A decision to approve the application doesn't mean that one of the noise reports is wrong and the other's right. It simply means that the test of whether there's a compelling harm that's been demonstrated, which overrides any benefits of the scheme. So in this situation, members, you've got the benefit of your internal experts who've independently assessed the information on its merits. Their conclusion is that the information provided is sufficient to demonstrate that the impacts of the proposals are acceptable. And that's an entirely reasonable one based on their knowledge and skills, but also because it's not being demonstrated that their noise assessment provided by the applicant is evidentially flawed, and therefore to rely on it would be irrational. For example, there's no competing evidence that the base data that they've based it on, i.e. people playing on the existing court, is significantly underestimated what that noise level would be. Ultimately, as a local planning authority, we don't have a stake in whether paddle courts are built or not. We're just considering the application on its merits. Our basic fundamental starting point is an application is approved unless there's an overriding harm which demonstrably outweighs its benefits. So in this instance, the noise data doesn't support that conclusion, and that's why the application is recommended for approval, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. So now we move on to questions from members. These questions specifically related to the site visit and what you've heard today, not general questions, particular questions to do with the noise levels. So I've got Councillor Adams, then Councillor Trent.
Sorry, I have a couple, but I'll do them in one and hopefully get them out of the way. So with the noise levels, what's the level at which enforcement action could or would be taken? Is it sort of 50 decibels? If it was over 50 decibels, is that the sort of level? And secondly, on Councillor Rampton's point that she made about the thickness of the acoustic barriers, I think she said that the proposed ones at the West Hands Club were thinner than the ones at East Dorset, the ones being used at East Dorset. Is that the case? And if so, would that be something we'd be able to condition to make them thicker?
Mr. Hodges or Mr. Kulik, whichever.
Ask Mr. Hill to if you could actually drop in.
Yeah, thank you for that. So unfortunately, when we assess a statutory noise nuisance, we can't really adopt the simplistic view of just taking a measurement. I think particularly in this instance, the noise climate is already dominated by fairly high noise, fairly high levels of noise or road traffic noise, as well as the noise of existing tennis courts. So if we were to take a simplistic view to say that, well, any exceedance of 50 decibels would result in a statutory noise nuisance, we would need to, I mean, we would need to consider what would be the contribution from the existing courts. So clearly the existing courts used for tennis would have a significant contribution as well. So we can't just take it would be a very simplistic view just to take a noise measurement. What we would do is we would consider various factors such as the sorry, I have made a few notes actually. So what we would do is we consider various factors such as the locality. So in terms of if for example the paddle tennis courts were in an area where there was no existing tennis courts, then clearly the impact of the paddle tennis courts would be quite significant. We consider the time, how often residents are being disturbed. I know in many of the reports and I know the planning agent speaking on behalf of the residents has spent quite a bit of time with regards to the maximum noise levels. Now, the maximum noise levels are modeled on the incidents where all the courts are used at exactly the same time. The impulsive noise levels is when the actual ball and bat interactions occur. It's highly unlikely that on all two courts, as well as the existing court, that the ball bat interactions would happen at exactly the same time. So we would consider, we would need to consider that as well. We would consider the duration. How often is the residents being exposed to this impulsive noise? We would we'd also need to consider avoidability. Is it avoidable can the club avoid exposing residents to impulsive noise? And they can't, because at the moment residents are already exposed to impulsive noise from the existing club. So it's going to be, so I think to answer your question, and I hope I haven't sort of gone off on a tangent, but to answer your question, I think it would be a very simplistic view just to take a noise measurement. To assess a statutory noise nuisance, we'd have to assess, there's a number of factors we need to consider. You had a second question.
Yeah, the other question was about the thickness of the glass for the acoustic wall.
So my understanding is that the applicants have recently sent me a correspondence, something that was sent to Peter Kulik as well, that the proposal is actually to increase the thickness of the acoustic wall in line with the one that's actually installed currently at East Dorset. So that would actually have a significant improvement in the acoustics. I think it's from 8 millimeters up to 10 millimeters. I think although question not specifically relating to the acoustic wall, but I know there's an intention as well to increase the thickness of the astroturf, which provides more absorption, again, which will provide further acoustic attenuation. So yes, so my understanding is that the intention for this site is to use the same specification of glass as East Dorset, which is better than the original application.
Thank you. And if we were minded to approve this, we can condition that if we think it's appropriate. Councillor.
Yeah. Would we have the ability of if we granted it, making it reviewable after 3 years or something of that nature, so that you can actually see how it works and then, reassess it if it doesn't work or something? Is that possibility available to us?
I would say in this instance, no, simply because of the extent of investment and cost in building the court. So in terms of a temporary use where you trial running it for a year, you wouldn't ordinarily do that in relation to where you've got to do constructional works as well, because of the sort of kind of upfront cost and difficulty of doing that. If you've got an existing building, you're trialing your use for a year, then yeah, you could do that. Much more difficult when you've actually got to put the applicant to the expense of all the work shown on that plan, surfacing, courts, glass, acoustic screening, with the possibility that then that could all come down in a short space of time. So my advice would be that wouldn't meet the test of reasonableness that the condition would need.
Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Cooper.
It's about the kind of the duration of the game, the paddle game. So is it like going to be a noise that occurs all day? I know this is a difficult one to quantify, but is there a break in it? Would there be planned breaks in when the courts are not being used? Or is it consistent from say 9 in the morning till 6 that they'll be booked up and at weekends as well? So what's the kind of plan for that if it can be measured?
I think the answer is that's a difficult one to control. It's a short answer. If the court is there, I imagine the applicant will want to see it used because I'm having to make a significant investment to do that. So they would want to encourage its use. I think for us, we have to base our decision on the noise data and the information that we've got, and the advice from our internal experts in that regard, and that's understood on the basis of usage that is likely. So it's a game in which it stop starts anyway. So, it needs to be understood that if we grant the use from 9 till 9, potentially it could be used that length of time.
Yes, Councillor.
On our visit to East Arts or whatever it was on Monday, I sat by the clubhouse when we were all waiting to arrive, and you couldn't hear the paddle game going up the end. And looking at the chart you showed us earlier, you said that was 100 metres away. So I'm fairly convinced that the distances that they're proposing would be fine. My only concern would be, I think
Before you continue, is this a question or are you expressing opinion?
No, it's a question.
Right, that's fine.
If we let them get there. The new courts that they're proposing to put on, did I hear you say they were going to put the glass sound deadening down both sides of it as well as at the back and front? Because that did make a difference when we were stood next to the courts.
Yeah, so hang on. It's on the north side, joining the car park. Sorry, it's on the north side, joining the car park, and then running down both sides, but not on the south side. That's where the acoustic screening is going. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Down.
Hi, yes, just a couple of things in relation to was it Ken Parker, the objector, his statement, and also and some of the points that he made. So I just wanted to seek some clarification regarding that. So it was mentioned, and I've got very scant notes here, that the average measurement that we took is that the council officers took is not the correct way of measuring. So I just want clarification on that. And also that we should be measuring from the garden boundary, not the house boundary. So I just want to make sure that we are measuring the correct way. So that just have clarification on that, please.
Mr. Hill, can you come in on this, please? I think it's your speciality.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I didn't take the measurements. The measurements were taken by the acoustic consultant, but the measurements were taken to compare against the Sports England guidance, and they were taken in accordance with the Sports England's guidance. So they were taken in accordance with the Sports England's guidance.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question.
I think Mr. Kulik also might have a further update on this from something he's put in the chat.
Yes, yes, let me just quickly share a few slides. So I just want to make a reference to the Sports England guidance. So hopefully you can see that. So within paragraph 9.2, the Sport England guidance says, when taking the measurements, we should do the measurement up to the nearest elevation. So it's not, as some people already said, we should measure up to the nearest point of the garden amenity. Is actually the measurement within the guidance around 1 meter from the facade, so from the elevation of the building. So hopefully this will clarify this concern.
Thank you. Any more
There is a plan showing maximum levels, and Mr. Hodges can show that, because that plan you were showing is the average levels, but there's a whole series of contour plans which shows the actual real impact of the noise when you measure the percussion noise in it. You'll see where the orange and red extends to in that plan. And I think it would be very transparent of you, Mr. Hodges.
Have you got that?
Proper understanding.
Well, that information is all available online, Mr. Park, isn't it? So that's in the acoustic report and it's all available. And so that information is available and it's on the website. It's on.
I'm sorry, I must intervene. We do not take comments from the general public during these meetings. This is a meeting in public, but not a public meeting. So only registered speakers may address the meeting, of which we've already had the 3. So members, have you any further questions? No? Okay, we move on to debate then. Particularly with regard to what we saw on the site visit and what you've heard today. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I found this, I'm glad I called for the site visit because I found it very, very useful and very educational. And I must admit, I'm still trying to get over the effect of the acoustic screening, which far exceeded my expectations, which doesn't normally happen with technical solutions. At the moment, we have a paddleboard court, which is only just a bit over half the distance from the nearest dwelling than the nearest dwelling to the proposed paddle courts. And I must admit that, and it has no acoustic screening. And I must admit that if I was in the front of the house opposite, which for some reason doesn't have the tall hedge around it like all the other houses have, which I think mitigates the sound slightly, I would find that a little bit annoying. But the effect of the acoustic screens seem to be such that if they are correctly placed, even at that shorter distance, they would bring it down to acceptable levels. So, and I think, you know, looking at the East Dorset example, as I said, I couldn't actually believe how well these screens worked. And there was only 2/3 of the screen up because one part was obviously, you know, under repair. But I'm still trying to get my head around how on earth it can affect it without sound coming from the side. You know, you can actually stand behind the screen and suddenly it's gone. And I think subject to the screens being in the right place and up in advance, then I would be quite confident that the proposal would fit in with, well, barely noticeable effects. But I would want to be absolutely sure that they are in the right place. And I did notice that the proposal is that they're slightly to the side now, because I thought they were going to be sort of front and back of the courts, whereas actually to the side there's less space to lose the sound in, because you've got a massive car park where the houses that are nearest to it. So I'm reasonably relaxed about it, but I do think that we just need to be certain that the acoustic fences would be in the right place. But as I say, what we saw on Monday made me feel quite confident that this could actually fit in without causing the nuisance that people fear. And I would particularly welcome an acoustic screen being put up where the existing court exists, because I do think that that is needed. That's the one property where I think I would be annoyed at the noise level in as it stands at the moment. So yeah, I'm reasonably relaxed on that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Adams.
It's kind of a question and a comment. I agree with Councillor Trent on the impact of the noise reduction from the acoustic screens, and I accept that they're covering it on 3 sides. Surely it would go quite some way to addressing the residents' concerns as well. Could they not just do it on all 4 sides? Is that something that could be secured by condition or not?
And so the short answer is it reasonable? If the solution that they presented is adequate, and that's the advice you've had from environmental health, then we don't really have any grounds to do more than that. And likewise, in relation to Councillor Trent's point about, although it's been offered by the applicant, the fencing to the existing court, that court's there. So if we oppose a condition, it must be related to the development that's happening. The problem with trying to secure a fence for the existing court is that can continue as is. And moreover, my environmental health colleagues have investigated the noise from that court and concluded it's not a statutory nuisance as well. So we don't really have the grounds to ask for that additional screening for the existing court, I'm afraid.
Sorry, for the existing court bit, so that's almost separate, but could there be a logic in proposing a condition on it based on the cumulative impact of the noise from 3 paddle tennis courts? Meaning, because obviously that's in theory could be up to 2 or 3 times the noise. Yeah. So conditioning the one that they're happy to do in any case based on the cumulative harm caused by the addition of 2 extra courts.
Yeah, sure. So the noise data assessment does that cumulative assessment. And the advice that we've had is that the details that we got are acceptable, and it doesn't require in this instance the additional mitigation for the existing court because it doesn't breach any of those criteria that we've applied against it.
Councillor Dow.
I noted the applicant's offers around the increasing the thickness from 8 to 10 millimetres, and also the thickness of the turf, and also a suggestion that the closing time of those paddleboard courts was changed. We were thinking about 6 o'clock, I think, the last time, but we suggested 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, yeah. I think that's something that I think would be. I think it may be 8 o'clock, but then I can understand there might be reasons for that.
Can I just intervene? I think what was mentioned was till 9 o'clock in the week and 6 o'clock at
6
weekends.
o'clock at weekends, yes. So, and also the extent that the panels are going to be added to the side as well, which wasn't on the original plan. So also in respect of our visit, that acoustic, I agree with Councillor Trent, that acoustics, the barrier that we saw did actually make a big difference. So on that basis, I'm minded to look at the conditions and make sure they're satisfactory with a view to approve.
Am I to take that as a motion?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so have I got a seconder? Oh, I've got 2 at least. I think I saw Councillor Trent first, but Councillor Hitchcock was a very close, Olympic distance behind.
Chair, can I just clarify those proposed amendments to the operating hours, please? Was it a later start time as well? For
I can't remember what we've got in the original.
Or
what? Can you clarify what's in the
Yeah, so the recommendation so condition 6, paddle courts shall only be used between the hours of 0800 and 2100 hours.
So the offer from the applicant, which I think Councillor Dow was accepting in her motion, was till 21 in the week and 18 at weekends with the same start time. Yeah, okay. So
and Chair, we normally add in bank holidays for the earlier finish as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And did we want to condition the
thickness of the glass as well? Any other changes, conditions, or
thickness of the turf?
thickness of the turf, yeah.
Can I just check on that? Is this to be all in accordance with what's at East Dorset? Yeah.
I'm probably, yes, but certainly for this one.
Chair, on that basis, what I'd suggest is amending condition 3. I think in the circumstances, perhaps if it's delegated to the head of planning services, head of planning operations, apologies, just to amend condition 3. So it's talking about doing it in accordance with the approved plans, and then we amend in effect the first paragraph so we get submission of the additional details of the acoustic fencing and surfacing, along with the noise mitigation measures and management controls in the second part of that condition, so that that's all with us before we to be discharged.
Okay, happy with that, proposer and seconder? Thank you. I'm just flicking through if there's anything else. Councillor Adams?
Sorry to keep coming back to it, but I know we don't necessarily need to condition it, but if the applicants are happy to do it and it's going to help the residents, and they've said they don't have an issue, can we not just add on the one on the existing court, because the applicants aren't going to kick off about it because they've just said they're happy to do it. And it's going to, but they've said they're going to, but they don't have a requirement. So
I think maybe this is where we need to bring our legal officers.
Well, no, I mean the honest, I can answer that, Chair.
Right.
The answer's still the same. Even if they want to do it, even if we like it's a good idea, I have to give you the advice that I can't justify it under a condition because it's not reasonable. It doesn't meet the test. So that's going to be our starting point.
Can we add it as an advisory?
Nonetheless, we have all heard it. It's been broadcast. It is now recorded. That offer has been, is in the public domain. If it's not adhered to, there might be a certain discontent, shall we say? Even if it's not formally conditioned. So,
are we able to note it as an advisory, not a condition, but to actually note it in the thing that this has been offered and we would welcome that.
It'll be in the minutes, so it will be in the public domain. Oh, any further comments? I must admit, I think the site visit was extreme. Sorry, what? Oh, right. I'll have him in first before I make my comments. Mr. Hill?
Yes, sorry. It's really just to follow on from that. I'm quite happy to have a discussion with West Hants with regards to whether this would be viable. Mr. Alves and I have had a number of discussions about the existing court, so I'm happy to have a discussion with him. As I say, I can't compel him to install the additional screening because we haven't served an abatement notice, but I'm more than happy to have that discussion with him to provide him with advice, because ultimately, we want to protect the residents as well. So, so if we aren't able to do it through the planning system, I'm happy to have a discussion with Mr. Alves and see if we can agree on further improvements to the existing court.
Thank you.
But if the noise on the south side, the one bit that's not protected by the things, becomes so much that it becomes a statutory nuisance as part of probably more of the enforcement process, could you then, to address that nuisance, require them to put up something like another board on the south side, just because obviously you'll be monitoring it?
That will be up to planning enforcement too.
Is it within their powers to compel them to do that, to address it?
Yeah, it's actually within environmental health's powers.
Yeah,
where there's statutory nuisance, it wouldn't be a planning enforcement issue. But yeah.
So any noise nuisance or our statutory means of dealing with it, whatever it is.
If I knew that could be a remedy, that would then reassure me to
it would be
the application.
It would be.
What, to make them put a board up? That's fine.
Well, to take whatever action is necessary. So, as I was saying, I think the site visit was extremely informative to those of us, which I think is probably all of us, who didn't really know much about paddle tennis. I'd watched the YouTube of games, so I knew a bit about it, and I got it clear in my mind, and I think this is true, that it's not like squash where you deliberately hit the ball against the wall, but it can bounce off the wall in the course of the game legally. and then be played after it's bounced against the wall. So it's not hit against the wall with any huge force. And I even without any protections, acoustic fencing, even the court that didn't have any acoustic fencing, the noise was not as bad as I feared it might be. And with the acoustic fencing that we saw in action at East Dorset, as several people have said, it made such a big difference that walking in beyond the car park, so considerably nearer to them than the nearest houses, you couldn't hear any sound at all from it. And it's not as though ordinary tennis is a totally silent game. I mean, one of the comments has been about players shouting. Well, players shout in tennis. You've only got to watch Wimbledon and you know how they shout in Wimbledon, in tennis. So it's not that you would shout in one game and not the other. I can't see any difference in that respect. But the acoustic fencing was so impressive in its performance, to my mind, that I have no concerns on a noise issue on approving this. So are there any more comments from anybody? No? Right, we'll move straight on to any more comments from? No? We'll move straight on to the vote then. The motion has been put and seconded that we approve this with the alterations to conditions on the times of use, on the thickness of the glass. I think that was all the only changes we made in the end.
Yes, amendments to the use hours, which is condition lost it now 6, and then amendments to condition 3 about the details of the sound attenuation.
Okay, so those who are happy to approve this, please vote now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Nobody against, no abstentions. Thank you, members, and thank you those who have come to take part or to attend this discussion. So I'll allow a few seconds for people to leave who wish to, and then we'll move on to the next item. Okay, so item 6B, which is Broadstone Middle School in Dunyeats Road. And again, Mr. Hodges is going to present. We're keeping you busy this morning.
Yes, apologies. Caroline Palmer is on leave this week. So this is an application for Broadstone Middle School that's on Dunyeats Road. In case anyone's not been there, this is Gravel Hill up going on the right-hand side with the roundabout where the crematorium is, Camphor Heath on the right-hand side. School campus is here and it extends out with its playing field there. Here's an aerial shot. I think by the looks of the building sort of mostly dates from about 1960s, 1970s. The campus in there, a car park at front, existing hard surface play areas and a playing field up to the north. Just highlight how well the site's screened by mature trees as well. This very much screens any views towards any neighbouring properties that you can see on over to the east and the west. The key sort of planning issue on this site is that the site half lies in the greenbelt, so it's a bit of an anomaly. It's kind of unhelpful in some ways. So part of the campus is within the greenbelt and part not. So that's the boundary of this there, where the greenbelt comes in grey there. So the proposal is for a new sports hall. You've seen the report, they've got some significant operational issues. Currently they're sharing the main hall as for assembly, dining room, and also sports activities. That's really inefficient for them. So they need to do a new sports hall so they can use those spaces better. This is the siting of it. You'll see it's close up to this tree boundary on the eastern side. And what we just tried to do here is just show how sort of part of the building is within the greenbelt, part not. So because of how restrictive Greenbelt policy is, we needed them to kind of justify that. So that's what we set out in the report, their reasons for why it needed to go there. In terms of the building, well designed, curved roof building, very much typical of these sort of modern sports halls, and in suitable materials as well. The sit back nicely, you can see how sort of set into the site on this bottom slide. The land rises up to the tree belt. Just in terms of layout, this is a standard badminton court. Doesn't necessarily mean that's how it would be laid out, but you can see there's a substantial area for indoor sports, and then necessary changing rooms, toilets and showers for pupils and staff. It's mainly open and voided to the top for obvious reasons, but there's a mezzanine with a viewing gallery at the first floor. Just so in case you can't read that, the maximum height is 10.9 metres, so fairly typical for this size of building. Just a couple of photos. So it gets sited on the existing hard surface courts, against the sort of tree belt in the background. And then looking back towards the site, so it's looking east. It's not the clearest view, but the main sort of school buildings are in the background, and it sort of sits just in there. For us, as I say, the main planning issue is it's just part location in the Greenbelt. We've asked the applicant to kind of explain why it couldn't go elsewhere, and the principal other sites would just be on the car park. And that causes them a significant problem, because that pushes the car park elsewhere in the site. That's really difficult. Don't want the cars sort of circulating around the building. And then the only other option would bring it down into here, but this is in effect a sort of breakout space for the existing school, which is one of the reasons why it's good surveillance and useful space for them. So we're satisfied with the justification. I'm content to recommend it for approval, Chair.
Haven't got anyone registered to speak, so are there any questions from members?
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Cooper.
I'm just wondering why it's come to committee. That would be interesting.
It's because it's a BCP,
Right,
BCP land and BCP
Okay,
application.
I mean, I've read the papers and I just have no objection at all really to the provision of a sports facility for young people. The bit about the green belt is dubious really, with the fact that the planning laws are going to be sort of changed and they're going to be looked at. I know that's in the future, but the biodiversity officer has not said anything about the impact on trees or nature within the area, and I can't think of anything better than providing a space for young people to.
I did ask about BNG because of the new legislation, but Mr. Hodges explained why it's not specifically mentioned in here.
Yes, so it's the age of the application. Basically, the regulations came in earlier in February, and this has been with us since before then. So a later application will be caught by the BNG requirements. Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay. So, Councillor Adams, are you coming in for comments or a question? Yeah, fine.
I think it's absolutely brilliant. Great. Let's let the kids play sport. I'm happy to propose it.
Have we got a seconder? No. Right, we'll move straight to the vote. This is a quick one. So it's been moved and seconded that we accept the application as it stands, with no alterations or additional changes to conditions or anything like that. So those in favour, please vote now.
It's unanimous.
Right, so that is the end of the committee for this month. Start to finish in an hour.